Main Street, Kendallville originally was marked as a buffalo trail and later as an Indian trail. The buffaloes made a path from Michigan all the way to the Salt Licks, southern Indiana. And the Indians later used this same pathway. A plank road was constructed at the future site of Main Street, Kendallville in 1848. The history of downtown Kendallville dates back to the mid-19th century. Samuel Minott opened the first Main Street general store in 1840 at the northeast corner of South Main and Gold Streets, near the Haight Funeral Home. The city's first post office was located in the same store on the second floor. The first newspaper in Kendallville, the Noble County Star, was published in 1849 in the same store. William Mitchell was the father of Kendallville. Mitchell was born in Montgomery County, New York in 1807, and he and his wife and two children left New York in 1836, coming to Indiana via the Erie Canal to Buffalo, then by steamboat to Monroe, Michigan. They then traveled by horse and wagon to the present site of Kendallville. Mitchell bought a tract of 200 acres of timberland in the area and began to clear the land. Mitchell saw the need for a trading center and realized the area would attract others. In 1840, Mitchell influenced the federal authorities to establish a post office in his log cabin. Mitchell apparently was able to secure the post office by suggesting that the new post office be named after the current U.S. Postmaster General, Amos Kendall. The future town then took the name of its post office and became Kendallville. In 1848, Mitchell helped initiate the construction of the Lima Plank Road, now State Road 3, from Fort Wayne to Lima, now the town of Howe, in LaGrange County. The Lima Plank Road was about 60 miles long. The old Lima Road, as well as the Plank Road, went through Main Street, Kendallville. The Lima Plank Road opened in 1848, and toll gates were established 6 to 10 miles apart. The road failed to repay stockholders of the Lima Plank Association for the cost of the construction, and in 1858, the route in Noble County was turned over to the Noble County Commission. In 1849, Mitchell platted 20 lots, which became the west side of the Main Street Business District, and gave them away to anyone who would live on them and improve the land. Each lot was 22 feet wide. This uniform width is still evident in adjoining Main Street buildings today. By 1849, there were about a dozen families living in the village. In 1857, the population grew to 300. William Mitchell was also instrumental in getting the east-west and the north-south railroads built through Kendallville in the late 1850s and 1860s. That, along with the Lima Plank Road, are now why Kendallville became a trading center and Noble County's largest community. Mitchell was active in politics and was elected as a Republican in Congress in 1860, the year Abraham Lincoln was elected president. Mitchell was a great admirer and personal friend of Lincoln. Kendallville's Main Street was paved with bricks about 1900, and Main Street was paved with asphalt in the 1940s. Now I'm going to start talking specifically about buildings on Main Street. We'll start at the New Sun building at 102 North Main Street. This building was built by Hermann Kruger in 1880. Kruger was born in Berlin, Germany, and came to America at the age of 19, arriving in New York in 1854. He learned that there was work in Indiana building the railroads, so he came to Kendallville in May 1854, walking from the train station in Sturgis, Michigan. Ironically, he spent the last English shilling in his pocket for his supper and overnight stay in a barn which stood on the future site of the block of buildings that he later built on the east side of the 100 block of North Main Street. 100 years ago, the Kendallville Post Office was located in the 102 North Main Street building occupied by the New Sun. The New Sun and Kendallville Publishing Company have occupied 112 North Main Street since 1911. The Iddings, Gilbert, Leader, Anderson block, those buildings were built in 1892 to 1896. The original owners' names are at the top of the buildings. The name Anderson is missing from the right building. It was built by the only African-American Kendallville businessman of the 19th century. His name was Alonzo Anderson. He was a barber, and his wife was a woman's hairdresser. 100 years ago, the Kendall Hotel stood in the north lot of the Anderson building. It was purchased by the Crenshaw family that owned the V&A restaurant next to it. The Kendall Hotel was raised in September 1976. 100 years ago, a cigar store was in the W. Leader building, and a women's millinery shop for women, clothing and hats, was in the Iddings building, where business service is today. A grocery store was in the Sportsman's Inn 100 years ago in 1911. 100 years ago, the relaxation station at 101-103 North Main Street had a grocery and plumbing store. From 1925 to 1936, the Citizens National Bank occupied the building. The bank at this location was the scene of the first bank robbery in the city's history on October 16, 1931. 5 armed men entered the bank and took $25,000 in cash. They were later captured. The bank closed during the Great Depression. The bank vault remains in the building. The building at 101-105 South Main Street was also built by Herman Kruger. It was built as a hotel in 1865. It was later called the Kelly House. You can still faintly see the name Kelly House on the north end of the brick building. Today it is occupied by the Kendallville Auto Parts, 101 South Main Street, and the dress shop at 105 Main Street. At 105 South Main Street today is Special Moments. This was part of the Kelly House. Later the George Lohman drugstore was located here, and it later was a cigar store and city newsstand. Dr. Richard Gutstein, a medical doctor for more than 50 years, had his office in the upper story. His son Al died last month. He was a longtime attorney in Angola. The buildings that occupy the Main Street soda shop at 107 South Main Street and the old Stroman's Electronics at 109 South Main Street were built between 1892 and 1896. This is a 2-story brick Italianate building. The old Stroman's Electronics building, 109 South Main, originally was the Otis drugstore, which opened in 1894. The store at 109-111 South Main Street today is the Main in Mexico building. It originally was the AR drugstore, which opened in 1894. It later was part of the Stroman Electronics store. At 115 South Main Street today is Timothy's Jewelry. It was a jewelry store 100 years ago. In 1933, it was the site of the A&P grocery store, and is probably best remembered as the Indiana and Michigan Electric Company. At 117 South Main Street today is Mr. B's. This building was built around 1890. This was a drugstore from at least 1903 to 1916. It was Kenny Gardner and Al Bryant's radio shop in 1929. In the 1940s, it was the Cox Market, and probably today is best remembered as the Taylor Shoe Store for many years. Dr. H.O. and W.S. Williams were medical doctors who had their offices in the upper floor.